Hello, my name is Matt Brown, and I'm the VP of Product here at Voxbone. Today, we're going to be discussing how measuring call quality leads to better CX. I'm joined by Diane Myers, Chief Analyst, Enterprise Collaboration at Omdia. Diane, thanks for joining us today. So, first question: this year has seen a big upheaval in people moving to the cloud, especially with the trend towards work from home. What are you seeing in this space?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Really appreciate being here. And, as we have seen since, I guess earlier this year, depending on where you are in the world, there related to the pandemic, a lot of people have moved employees and to a work from home environment. So to me, I think the most important thing to think about is that businesses are moving from legacy environments where things are on the premise and they're managing things themselves to now to service providers, right? To UCaaS providers, collaboration providers, and SIP trunking. And so if you are a company in this space offering these services, you're growing and you're accelerating and things are happening extremely fast. If you were in Asia, it was earlier this year, North America and Europe, that March, April timeframe. And if I'm a UCaaS provider, let's just take that as one segment. You saw a huge acceleration in scaling of the business, and because of that, there's lots of things to think about in terms of what your requirements are for those individual customers.
So with the trend towards work from home, one of the things that we're seeing and we're hearing a lot of is the issue of call quality, particularly as it pertains to more and more customers consuming communication services on residential networks as opposed to enterprise grade broadbands. What are you seeing in that space? Or is call quality a rising concern? How are you seeing that dynamic changing?
Yeah, here's the interesting thing. First of all, when we saw everyone move to home, right, and everyone start to, quarantine, basically, that's the best way to think about it. Call volumes rose, and then if you think about the phone and the expectation for individuals, they expect it to work. And the challenge is that it's not that case, right? Because as in a business environment where I'm supporting employees spread, across a region, across the globe, the business no longer has the insight and the ability to really view the network across all of these individuals. You could be hundreds or it could be thousands of employees, right?
So one of the things that we've come across as we've helped companies with their migration from on-premise services to the cloud is overcoming the perception that there's a quality gap between physical on-prem infrastructure and a cloud-native voice solution. And it's required a lot of education and hand-holding to get CIOs there. What have you kind of seen, and what are you hearing on that journey?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, when we go out and we survey businesses, and if they have not moved to let's just say straight SIP trunking or a full cloud collaboration and UC service, often one of the top three reasons is they're concerned about quality, right? And I mean, hands down, that is, even if it is still just a perception, right? Like, reality versus perceptions, there is still, with a lot of CIOs and a lot of IT managers, the perception that if I move to these services, my quality is going to degrade, right? And so what we suggest, right, for a lot of companies is that they have to put into place measurements for businesses, right? First of all, it's hard to demonstrate. You can throw results at companies all the time, but at some point there has to be a leap of faith, and they have to go in and say, "Oh, look, these are going to be the quality of service guarantees. I'm going to put them in place. I'm going to have things to back it up, right? I'm going to give you the tools, you the business, to help monitor it, to help look at it." And if you can walk a CIO or even a more mid-market company who might not have a CIO, if you can walk them through what you have in place and what the guarantees are going to be, I think it starts to build a level of trust. But at the end of the day, you have to deliver on it.
When it comes to the big voice platforms like the Zooms or the 8x8s or the Ring Centrals, what are some of the challenges that you see that they are facing with regards to call quality, call performance?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a handful of things that may not pertain to each provider out there, but that we see, right, in individual cases. But I think the number one is just having that full end-to-end view across their whole platform, across the whole network, with all the different providers. And in conjunction with that, really having that real-time visibility when services, really scaled and escalated, and we had people using that, problems started to creep up. I mean, they were in the news, right? I'm not going to call out providers. I'm not going to call out, companies for falling down, because in many cases it really wasn't their problem, right? It was probably somewhere in the food chain, somewhere in the partner landscape, and it takes some time.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of manpower to kind of scale and monitor and manage that.
Well, yeah, especially if you're doing it yourself, right? I mean, if you are putting in your own management tools, your own, your own probes, and you're piecing it together across the different partners, you're going to miss things, and it's a lot. It's a lot of manpower. It's a big proposition. You're going to need teams. And as you grow globally, that's continues to be, a challenge.
Yeah, and as you spend time and effort building out that data infrastructure that's required in order to have this real-time view, that takes away time and effort and resource and energy from your actual core business. It's a bit of a double-edged sword at the moment.
And I would say, it is absolutely a double-edged sword, right? I mean, because you're growing, and you're trying to provide that quality service, so you can really maintain those commitments that you've given to customers, and they feel good about it and they're staying with you. I would also say a challenge to think about that may not be forefront, right? I think, some of the points I brought up are pretty common, right? How do I have that visibility across my, from end to end? How do I make sure it's real time? But now as we see more and more companies, and there's a lot, right? That are expanding internationally and offering services on a global basis, there is the real challenge to be thinking about around all this data that's being collected, right? So we got a lot of analytics and a lot of data that's coming out of all these tools, and whether or not you're piecing them together, or if it's your homegrown, but also maintaining the data storage and the privacy requirements that are now regulated, right? I mean, this is not you doing this for your customers; it's now the law, depending on what region you're operating in.
So Diane, where do we go from here? What are the current solutions? What are the pros and cons? What are the options for enterprises out there looking to get a handle on their call performance?
Yeah, I mean, today, right, you typically have a proprietary solution, right? So someone that has developed it themselves, they've customized it for their requirements, and that's expensive, right? That's expensive to develop, it's expensive to maintain. And if you're growing and you're scaling, it may not hit all the marks, right? And if you, but to hit it, but if that's the ultimate goal, you're just going to have to throw more money at it and more resources, right, to deploy it and maintain it. So you can go and get a third party off the shelf software, right, that can do the monitoring and the metering and all of that. That will give you some more tools, and and it cuts down the time of deployment, and all of that. But it may not be real time, or may not necessarily fit all of your own customized requirements, depending on how many partners you're using on the SIP connection, on the voice connection pieces. And then there is, I could go and utilize a cloud platform, right? A cloud solution, but that is going to be limited to a specific network, right? That's typically not going to be end to end. Let's say you're using 3 or 4 providers. It's not going to be that. The upside is there's no hardware, right? You're not going to have to develop it yourself, similar to kind of a specialized solution. So it has limitations. It gets you, it gets you going. It gets you where you need to be, but it may not have everything you need, and it will typically be limited to a specific network.
Fantastic. We've covered a lot of ground here today. Any closing remarks?
If I'm looking at partners, I want to understand what else can they provide me? How else are they getting me to where I need to be? And I know you guys are doing some great things in that regard, but to really take all of these things that we've talked about and understand, how and where can I best help my customers? Ultimately, I want to provide a high quality service, right, to my customers or to my end users, right, my employees out there, depending if I'm looking at these from a large enterprise perspective or, a UCaaS or a collaboration provider, right, who's dealing with, thousands or millions of end users.